The boy reports that on his 5th birthday he blacked out and had a nightmare. He reports that during this nightmare he remembered that this was the world from the game that he knew very well, and he, the villain, who is killed in this scene. Luke says he was just. The man says he loved this game. A fantasy world full of love and war, meant for adults, and the main character of this game is considered the strongest swordsman, the Sword Emperor, who is now enjoying life at the academy. A plot in which he can fall in love and train with his comrades to become stronger, after which he defeated the family of the evil duke who was planning a coup d'état. The second son of the Descados family, Luke Hugelo Descados, explains that he has a terrible nickname in this game. Luke is said to have bullied the protagonist and his friends, acting like a pathetic tyrant and hiding behind his family's authority, and people gave him nicknames, ridiculing his nasty appearance and character. The reason for the hero's terrible character is that his mother died immediately after giving birth, and no one in the family cared about him. He reports that, ultimately, the hero became a pawn for the duke, ready to be sacrificed. The hero neglected his training and developed an inferiority complex. Luke says he's supposed to be 15 years old at the start of the game. He asks if that means he'll be like this in 10 years. The boy says he doesn't want to die and explains that he still has memories from his past life, so the love of his new family doesn't matter to him. He explains that if he can stop himself from becoming a nasty, fat toad and not committing evil, perhaps he can change the future. Luke says that after that he will live a quiet and happy life. Fortunately, he is an aristocrat and does not have to worry about money. The guy says that his family is evil and that this cannot be changed. He cannot escape the fate that awaits them, and he wants to be strong enough to protect himself. Luke had a talent for magic. He says he can sense some kind of light spiritual energy and asks if it's mana. He also explains how to use magic without the game interface. He says it's treatment. The man says, "Oh," and explains that he'll try to say it out loud. The guy asks if it worked and explains that it's hard to tell right away. There's no health bar. Luke says he seems to be feeling a little better. He asks if it can get any better. The man says it's time for him to get up in the morning. Luke says he feels tired but healthy and asks if he passed out because he ran out of mana, explaining that it only lasts for about 10 uses. He says he could really use a teacher, but the girl asks if he's still feeling unwell. He tells her he won't understand anything until he starts studying magic. Luke says he wants to learn magic. The girl, specifically Luke's personal maid, is Syrup, a beastman dog. She says, "Maybe you'd rather read a book, Luke?" The girl is happy and shows 2 postcards with pictures of animals. He asks for Syrup, please. Luke says Syrup is the only one he can rely on. She replies that he's still just a boy. The girl says you can count on her. The girl says that beastmen and dogs, apparently like real dogs, enjoy training and suggests they start training. Luke says no, thanks. The girl says it's clear. The girl explains the difference between magical attributes and magic itself, and says the book is quite difficult to read. The man asks if it's of any use at all and says the girl is very good at reading such complex words. Luke explains that mana is a transparent energy that fills the air around you, and the amount and strength with which it can be used depends on your talent. He says he does have a talent for magic, and that the spiritual energy he sensed is indeed mana. The guy explains that how to use magic is to just imagine and direct mana where it is needed, and he was able to use healing because he imagined how mana was healing him. The difference between attributed and non-attribute magic is that non-attribute magic is simple magic that anyone can use, while attributed magic requires special talent, and most aristocrats have attributed magic. Luke explains that the Descados family has an exceptional lineage and that he can learn attribute magic. He sleeps soundly and won't wake up even if you disturb him. He lies on the bed and sleeps. Luke says he can't go to school right now because he's not feeling well. He explains that he has a headache and needs to get some rest. The girl says she will take care of Luke's safety. 1 year has passed. Luke reports that his daily mana reserve has increased, and he can increase his mana reserve by using it all every day. He explains that it was difficult at first, as he kept zoning out. Luke says it's a shame he never managed to find a teacher. He says that judging by Luke's appearance in the game, he needs to work on his health, as he has pimples, spots, warts, cracks in the skin and excess weight, and first of all he needs to take care of his health. Luke explains that people in this world don't wash themselves every day, explains that bubbles stick to your hands, and tells you to wash your face with bubbles. The girl asks why they are so foamy, and he explains that he has sensitive skin, so he thinks it will be gentler. The girl asks the man if he has sensitive skin. He says yes, but there's no need to worry about it now, and also explains that you won't know about it unless you see his appearance from the future. The girl explains that she is Luke's personal maid and will remember his daily routine, and he says that they have started doing facials twice a day together. For personal care, you need soap, body and face lotion, moisturizer and sunscreen, and you also need to be rich enough to use expensive products without thinking about the price. Luke says he can't get used to washing his body, but he's glad the girl has learned, and explains that even years from now, if she continues, her skin will be smooth and she'll grow up to be a real beauty. The girl says it seems Luke is getting all sorts of ideas, and says he looks much better. The man reports that he found the dishes from his past life to be healthy, but perhaps the dishes of this world simply aren't suitable for him, and his health immediately improved when he started cooking for himself. He says he has no stomach problems and that the food is delicious. Luke reports that he started waking up early in the morning to improve his routine and has started taking daily walks in the sun. The woman says Luke has also stopped sleeping until lunchtime. The girl says that they can now go for walks, and he says that he has started walking and doing simple exercises. Syrup suggests maybe it's time to start training, to which he declines and thanks. Luke reveals that he doesn't really enjoy training. He says he wants to live an easy and healthy life. The girl asks easy and healthy, and he confirms. The guy says you can become terrible if you eat and sleep. Luke explains that if he just eats and sleeps, he'll become something terrible pretty quickly. He says he thinks an easy life will be hard to achieve. The girl says he's so cute. The man says he has no idea how he got that way and that he thinks he has the potential to be handsome if he puts in the effort. The guy reports that even if that were the case, he still wouldn't have much free time. The girl asks because he's an aristocrat. Luke explains that a vacation isn't a vacation if you do nothing else. He says that an amusement park or a casino will quickly become boring if you do them every day. He says that the way his father treats him, he will eventually be sacrificed. He says that he may have been born an aristocrat, but that doesn't mean he's safe. He reveals that he abused his heritage, which led to his downfall. Luke explains that he will try to squeeze everything out of himself to prepare for the future. He says that since he had a privileged childhood, he will try to avoid unnecessary difficulties. He says that he expects his wife to support him in the future, and if he is unable to marry, he will need a source of income that will allow him to survive on his own without any worries. One of the choices that can change fate is not going to the academy, and Luke's character primarily appears only in the academy arc. The game is divided into two major arcs. The Royal Academy of Alecida is mentioned. The academy arc focuses on romance and training. The war arc deals with dealing with villains, and mastering both will lead him to a bright future. The guy says that if he doesn't attend the academy, his chances of survival will increase significantly, but he has no reason for it, and yet. Luke says that the characters from this game are there and he loves them. He says he'll try to enjoy this world as Luke and wants to be a happy slacker. The girl asks him if he wants to live a healthy and easy life and tells him that he needs to learn swordsmanship. He explains that he'd prefer to move as little as possible. She says it's not only fun, but can also help him protect himself. Luke says he doesn't understand why she needs to learn fencing when he has her. Syrup asks if he knows she's been training. Luke says he felt that way. The girl says she'll leave the fighting to herself and the guy agrees. The girl says good night. Luke says he knows he's turning down every workout offer she's made, but he still needs to move at least a little if he wants to be healthy. He says that's why he's invented a new challenge. The next morning dawns. He says, appear. He says, this is Val's original attributeless magic, which can work while he sleeps. The man says that before understanding how Val works, one must understand something else, and explains that attributeless magic is basic magic that transforms mana into different forms. Luke explains that attributeless magic can be divided into 5 categories. He explains that everyday magic helps with daily tasks like lighting and cleaning, and almost everyone can use this magic. but because of the cleaning spell, people in this world don't wash as often. He explains that power magic temporarily enhances physical attributes like strength, agility, or defense. Enchantment magic is a special school of magic that enhances weapons with attributes, and it's a form of support magic used by blacksmiths and sorcerers. Though Luke claims he has no idea how to use it, support magic is a school of magic that specializes in supporting or weakening others. Healing magic uses mana to restore the body. Non-attribute magic relies on mana transformation and is easy to use. Luke tells Val to bring him water. Luke explains that he just needs to command it. He thanks him. Luke announces that it's time for the final test and leaves everything to Val. Luke explains that he ordered Val to wrap his body around him while he sleeps and goes about his business. He remains silent, clenching his fist. He announces that his body will be exercised instead of him. He says that if he can practice unconscious, it will be a piece of cake. Luke reports that it seems to have worked. The guy says it's amazing that it can move on its own, so he can exercise while he's lazing around. The guy reports that his muscles still ache the next day. He says that so far everything is going well, but there is still a lot to do. Luke says it's only noon and he's already hungry, then explains that he was just working out and is still growing. He says that holding back too much is also harmful, and explains that his main goal is the easy life of a lazy, villainous aristocrat. The girl says that this is, after all, the main goal she's working toward. 5 years have passed. Luke is reading a book, and Syrup is standing nearby. Chapter 2, titled My Attribute and My Teacher. The girl turns to Luke, calling him by name. He asks what happened. The woman remains silent. The woman asks how Luke can float like that. Luke says he's realized there's no difference between levitating a glass or himself. He explains that explaining this to CROP will be difficult, as she knows nothing about magic. He offers Syrup a ride and asks her not to avoid answering. Syrup asks if she can, to which he replies that of course. Luke says there's nothing to be afraid of here. Luke says he's supporting him with his magic. She says okay. Syrup sits, raising her hands and clenching her fists, while light sparkles around her. She says she can't believe it. The girl asks if she can ask one more thing, and the man says yes. Syrup says she's glad to hear it and that she's never felt so comfortable, saying how cool it is. The maid says he's always reading or sleeping and asks why his body is so toned. He says he can tell and thanks her. The man explains that the Syrup's remarkable mixture is due to the fact that she only saw him walking. The man explains that he first gathers the mana into a tight ball. The man explains that then he just needs to watch. The man explains that after that, he looks forward. The guy reports that VL has developed over the past 5 years and has come to understand him much better. The woman tells Luke to be careful because ghosts often appear in this area. Luke explains that he's not afraid of ghosts and plans to go through this place. He starts training martial arts. The girl says, "Wow," in admiration. The girl asks what's going on and reminds him that they said they hated training. The girl asks Luke, turning to him. Luke remains silent and concentrates on practicing a punch. Then he inhales deeply and exhales. The girl says it was amazing. He asks how she felt. The girl says she's amazed at the man's hard work, and he explains that he wasn't particularly hardworking. Syrup says he's never seen anyone move like that, not even real fighters. She says Luke moved like a true master and asks how that happened. He reveals that he has invented a new spell called Trace. He explains that he places Val in his body and sends memories directly from his brain into him. Luke explains that Val imitates the moves of his favorite martial artists, even though he himself doesn't remember them, but Val can pull them from his subconscious and imitate them. Luke reveals that, depending on the source, Val can even combine moves from games and manga. He says that he will combine all his knowledge about fighting styles and their history to create his own fighting style, and that's it. Luke says he's not even aware of how he moves, so it's hardly hard work, but he's trained his body and even developed some muscle memory, which is quite useful. He reports that the levitation spell alone is impressive. The girl says he's a genius, and he says he's not a genius. The girl explains that her master is only 11 years old, yet he's already glimpsed into the mysterious abyss called magic. Luke says he has no idea what she's talking about. The girl says she thinks it means Luke is just having a hard time understanding. He explains that he gained all the knowledge from his past life, but still doesn't quite understand how it works. The girl asks if he wants to change clothes now, and he says he's so tired after training. The woman reports that she briefly considered taking a bath and that she is with him. The man reports that this is the nearest source of water for bathing. He reports that the maids constantly repeat what a beauty syrup has grown into. The man explains that there is reason to think. He reports that the girl has continued to repeat the procedures he taught her over the past 5 years. And recently it seems her beauty has reached a new level. He says she behaves like a faithful dog, who rejoices at the mere mention of her name. Luke announces he has a job for the syrup. The man asks her to tell his father that he wants his magical attribute determined. The woman replies that she will do as they wish. He says he's really looking forward to it. He waves to the girl in the maid's uniform. The guy explains that attribute magic is magic that can be used with innate special abilities, and in this world it is called the power bestowed by God. Luke explains that if they tell you what your attribute is, you can use it, and says that your attribute is fire. The Ministry of Magic deals with all attribute magic and is the gathering place of the world's most powerful wizards. This is the Alicidian Ministry of Magic. The man says someone belonging to an elite group must come and determine his attribute, a privilege reserved for aristocrats. Luke says some people may not have attributes, but he doesn't think he needs to worry about that. Even among other nobles, all members of the Descastos family are reported to have remarkable attributes. The man says his father is nicknamed Sand, his older brother Iron, his older sister Seduction, and his stepmother Stone. Luke says he's curious what his attribute is and says he won't be waiting. The man says it's a pillow. He says he opened it without asking. The man says the girl is wearing nice clothes. Luke asks who it is. Luke says he was good-looking before and he's had all these beauty treatments, but is he really that cute? Luke thinks the man thought she was a girl. The girl says that this is the head of the Attribute Magic Department from the Ministry of Magic, Malsa Glicko-sama. Malsa Glicko says that he is the head of the Attribute Magic Department from the Ministry of Magic. The man remains silent. The man says he can't get in because the door is locked, and the girl explains that she won't open the door. A man speaks to a young lady. Luke informs her that he cannot allow her to stay in this house. The girl listens silently. The man says that Luke has an excellent memory. He remembered the full title of his position, although he heard it only once, and that this was to be expected from the servants and the Descastos family. They are not mistaken. A boy is reading a book. The girl tells him he's the young gentleman of the Descastos family, and the man asks where he is. The girl replies that, of course, he's here. The man is surprised. The girl announces that here he is, Luke Hugelo Descasto-sama, and apologizes for being rude. Luke says that he just praised her. The upper right text states that the church adheres to the doctrine of human superiority and teaches that all but true humans are deserving of contempt, with a true human being one who is not a half-human, beast-man, spirit, or demon. From right to left in the left panel, a man states that he is being shown for a moment. A woman says hello to Malsan. A man asks, Malsan? Luke says he's Malso Glicko. Luke says he thinks he's hardly a bad person now. He says to just call him he, and the guy says he's glad to meet you. The man speaks mutually. The man says he'll determine the attribute, and Luke tells him to go forward. The man tells him to close his eyes. The man sighs and asks if he's nervous. The man says he's starting. The girl says the words sleep and laziness. The moment Luke heard his words, the attributes awakened within me. Luke explains that it was more like he finally realized they were always within me, and then says it's amazing. The man says he'll allow himself to explain. He says he truly understood what kind of magic he could use as soon as he heard his attributes. The man reports that among the attribute magic, there is a unique one that is considered rare magic, and both of Luke's attributes are rare. They say that attribute magic is usually recorded and published publicly, but rare magic is kept secret. The man says they'll record magic as affecting the human body, and Luke says he certainly won't object. The man explains that everyone has spells that suit them better than others, and that skills can be improved by researching attributes. He says he can only think of simple uses and asks if there are any others. The man confirms this. Luke says that the magic that suits him means that this is the only way to become a master. The girl says she'll keep this in mind when she starts training. The man says he's surprised. The man says he didn't even know about the existence of appraisal magic. The man asks how he learned about appraisal magic. The guy asks if he just assessed his attributes and explains that, as a reincarnator, he simply guessed, but apparently it's a secret. He then says that that alone isn't enough. The guy asks if Luke will bring them tea with syrup. Luke says fine. The man and the guy talk awkwardly about it. The woman says it's time for tea. The man says it's delicious. Luke explains that it's an herbal tea very beneficial for the body, and that it cleared his head, and the man asks if he can find out what it's called. The woman explains that Luke grew the tea himself and can't buy it anywhere, if that's what the man wanted to know. He says he's willing to share the leaves if they want, and believes he should keep the appraisal magic a secret. The man thanks them for their understanding. The man says his daughter would love this tea and asks if Luke has a daughter. Luke explains that he has a daughter about his age who really loves magic. The man says, "By the way, speaking of magic." He then says he apologizes for asking, but he's curious about the flying pillow spell and insists it can't be ordinary magic. He listens. The man remains silent, and Luke apologizes for his outburst. Luke says everything is fine. He says, "Let's chat." Turning to a man in glasses and a trench coat, who is smiling. A woman and a slug stand nearby and listen. Against a backdrop of mountains and clouds, Luke says he can't understand why people are so afraid of death, as it's a natural part of life, and that fear of it prevents them from living fully. He then explains that by accepting death as inevitable, one can learn to appreciate every moment and live without regrets. The man thanks her for his time. The girl turns to Luke, asking if he would be her teacher, and if he doesn't mind, she calls him Malsan. He asks what. The man says he doesn't think Luke needs a teacher and asks what he'd like to learn. Luke says he's not asking for much. The man explains that he's a magic teacher. He says he simply wants to receive replies to letters in which he asks about things about magic that he doesn't understand, and asks if the other person doesn't mind. The man says he wants to be pen pals. The man says it's interesting. The man asks Luke if he minds if he asks questions too, and Luke says that means yes. The man says they've finally reached an agreement. He says, of course not, although he's not sure he can answer them. The man says he would be happy to correspond with them. Luke says thank you. He says that thanks to Malsan he learned a lot about magic and found himself a teacher, then says that now he understands. Luke explains that unlike attributeless magic, where mana and imagination are enough to cast spells, attribute magic has its own rules that must be followed depending on the attribute. He says appraisal magic helped him understand his innate magic. He explains that innate magic is the basic spells of an attribute, such as basic fire spells. He explains that lesser light creates a small fire, fireball condenses and strengthens mana, and firebolt launches condensed mana, and adds. Luke reports that his sleep attribute also has 3 innate spells. Sleep puts the target to sleep, and the effect depends on the mana invested and the target's resilience, so a balance is needed. The sleep timer allows you to set the sleep duration with a touch. The spell's target will not wake up until the timer expires. Removing sleep removes sleep magic from the target. Luke says that magic can be protected with resistance or defensive magic, but if the targets don't know in advance, he can put them to sleep before they even realize it, and if he uses laziness, he's sure they won't even think about what's happening. He says that both of his attributes are so powerful that they feel like cheating. He says that he would like to try countless spells. He says that he could put the teacher to sleep and skip classes as much as he wants. He explains that then he would be able to put people to sleep from a distance if. Luke reveals that he's made it a habit to give Val control of his body for morning practice. He then explains that it clears his head and allows him to better focus on his magical experiments. The guy says that perhaps he should cook something to eat. The girl asks if the host wants to eat and asks if he would cook something. He replies that he would. The girl says she still cooks dishes from memory from her previous life, and she and Syrup take turns cooking, then explains that while Syrup is excellent at any maid's work, the man remains silent. The girl says her cooking is quite edible, and Luke says she lacks attention to detail. The guy says he's washing his sweat while she's cooking. He says he'll talk to her later and that his concerns have been growing over the years, pointing out that he's 11 years old. The top right panel states that this is the nearest water source, where a man washes. Luke says he hears voices. He says there's usually no one here. The girl says she'll die here alone and not a single soul will help her. He asks if she'll die. Luke says the place is completely safe and asks who's there. The girl screams that she doesn't understand what's going on. He asks if there are people here. The girl says, "Oh," with surprise and embarrassment. He makes a noise of surprise. The guy says it must be a guest from his sister's tea party, who supposedly invites noble ladies to her place to expand her gang, and adds that he forgot it was today. The girl says she's naked. The girl asks if her little sister is visiting her older sister, Iris, and asks if Iris has a younger brother. Luke reveals that he is Luke Huguelot Descastos. Karen says she is the daughter of Count Carabin and gives her full name, and the girl asks why she is the one representing the Count. He explains that the girl is Karen's funny little sister. The girl says, "Wow." The man asks if the girl can use attribute magic. The girl says she understands and likes magic. Luke says he can show her his magic. Luke asks if the girl will show her magic. The girl says the store is closed or something like that and asks to wait a minute. The man then says. The girl apologizes. The man pats his heart and says, "Hop." The girl explains that the man's wallet contains his magic, and he explains that such a wallet can be bought anywhere. Luke says he'll show off his magic soon and asks him to get dressed for now. The man says the wallet can hold a lot of things and calls it interesting. Luke explains that his magic is attribute-based. The woman announces that cooking has begun. She chops vegetables, places them in a pot, and adds spices. The girl says she made soup from what she had on hand and wishes her a pleasant meal. Luke says it smells delicious and then asks what's so special about food prepared with magic. He says he's never eaten anything tastier in his life, not even in his past one. The girl laughs. He says it tastes insane. He asks what. Luke says he still feels strong and asks if she's buffing. He explains that a buff is a positive status effect and is surprised that she's no longer there. The man thinks this young noblewoman can cook buffing dishes. The girl says she'd be the perfect support for a lazy guy like him. He says he won't let her escape and asks, "Sister Karen?" The girl replies yes. A boy says he'd like his girlfriend to make him this soup every day when they grow up. The girl replies, "What's wrong?" The boy asks her to marry him and says he'd be happy to become related to her family. The girl thinks she'll be able to support him even if the Descastos family fails, and that she absolutely needs her delicious cooking. Surprised, the girl asks if he's asking her to marry him. Luke says he even contacted his father to make the proposal official, and that his father simply said, "Do as you please." The girl says he doesn't care about her at all as usual and thanks her. The man explains that everything happened quickly, and soon the families arranged a meeting, and welcomes her to his restaurant. The boy reports that his father simply showed up, said hello, and immediately left. The man explains that he can't believe the head of a prestigious family refused to attend his own son's engagement and invites them to sit down, saying it's no big deal. Luke says his intimidating behavior wouldn't be too much for her, and the girl says she doesn't care. The man asks to speak openly, stating that he is the youngest son and has nothing to offer but himself, and asks if that is enough for an engagement. The man says the Carabin family will gladly accept Luke. The man says that Karen has already told him how much she loves him. The girl says that she really needs someone like her and remains silent. The boy exclaims, turning to his father. The guy says he heard Luke propose to Karen, but some girls are making fun of her because of her looks. Luke says it bothers him. The guy exclaims, "Oh." He says he's talking about Iris's sister. Iris says she bullies everyone except her pretty friends and asks if she's ashamed of looking like that herself. The woman says she's a little chubby, but she's only 12 and still growing. And the man says he's glad he found a guy who saw Karen's inner beauty and asks for forgiveness. but not her. Luke says he actually finds her round face cute, and the guy explains. In the right panel, he explains that his family, including himself, regularly goes to sea, and asks if it would be a problem that he looks like he doesn't tolerate the sun well. The left panel explains that the Carabin family began as fishermen and traders, and is now involved in a wide range of activities. The guy tells her she has no brothers, so he'll inherit the house. The girl says that if she had a brother, she'd happily let him have it, and opening a restaurant with her cooking skills would be a great idea. Luke reports that he's been training and is stronger than he looks, and that his sun countermeasures are in perfect order, so there's no reason to worry. Luke says it's clear. He explains that he can simply summon Val onto the ship, he won't get seasick, and Val can carry his luggage, then he can just sleep. Then he announces that it's time for him to get out of their way. The man says they'll just have fun together. Luke agrees, and the girl thanks her father-in-law for trusting her. The man says he trusts Luke with his daughter. The man says he is in a hurry. Luke asks what's going on. The girl turns to him and says she wants to become beautiful enough to be with him, and then he asks if that's okay. He says he heard he's been working on his appearance and health since childhood, and that he's a boy but so handsome. The man says he's already quite cute, but the girl says he's not at all. The woman says she can only think of one person, and at home she always looks like she doesn't care, but he still keeps an eye on her. The girl says she wants help growing up beautiful. Luke explains he'd be happy to help, but he's a rather strict teacher, and the girl says she's ready to learn. The girl asks if someone like her can become beautiful. He says yes, and very easily. The girl says it's very easy. The man explains that if he uses both sleep and VL, he can put her on a diet, but she wants more than just weight loss. Luke explains that now is not the time to teach his little sister Karen everything at once and asks if she would mind going somewhere with him. Karen tells him to just call her Karen and suggests calling him Luke, to which he agrees. The woman says to continue the conversation in her room. The guy says syrup. The woman explains to make sure they're not being overheard. The girl says whatever you wish. Luke tells Karen he's worried about his sister's plan and warns her immediately. Karen asks what magic means and explains that her diet is powered by magic. The guy explains that he practices in simple terms while he sleeps. The girl says it sounds complicated and promises to explain everything. The man explains that his attributes are sleep and laziness. The girl says he has both, and that's great. The man thanks her and adds that he uses sleep for his diet. Val says he combines it with non-attribute magic, and the girl says it's cute. Val explains it's simple. He'll put the girl to sleep, and Val will enter her body, after which Val will do exercises using her body. The girl says, okay, so Val is a self-sufficient spell. Val says she's using it on herself as a demonstration. Luke says he'll set the sleep timer for a minute and asks Val to show him a simple exercise. Val responds with a smiley face. He says he moved like a martial artist and asks how it was. The girl says it was amazing. On the right, he says it was a minute. The guy says he doesn't remember anything and calls it simply unbelievable. The girl says he just needs to let Val enter his body, and the guy asks if he can do that too. Luke says let's try it and then says okay. The woman asks if Karina is doing well with the exercises. Karina says she's not doing well. The girl says she's quite strong, and he explains what it means to be strong, but doesn't exercise. He suggests that why not start with something simple so the body gets used to it, and the girl agrees. Luke says good morning. Then it's announced that an hour has passed. A woman asks how a guy lying on the couch is feeling and begins to answer. The girl is surprised and says it was completely exhausting and asks if it was an easy exercise. The girl says that her whole body hurts and she can't move. Luke explains that he will use the healing, and then suggests that she stick to simple exercises for now to increase her endurance, but warns that some muscle pain will still remain. He says that you need to hold on, and the girl says that she will try. The girl says that now it's time to talk about beauty. Luke explains that first you need to take some soap and lather it up well, and that the soap will absorb the dirt so there's no need to worry. He also asks if the soap will be able to wash away the dirt in this form. The girl warns that if you rub too hard, you can damage it. The woman says that you need to make sure your face is thoroughly washed and not rub it with a towel when drying it. The woman agrees. The woman says that Karen is full of curiosity, so it is quite pleasant to teach her, after which she confirms this with the word clear. Luke explains that without a good diet you can't get a good body, and then goes on to talk about nutrition. The girl says Luke is a great cook, and with the right ingredients he can make delicious diet food, expressing interest. The girl explains that since then, Karen has been passionate about creating diet dishes. He says Karen took all his food ideas and immediately turned them into dishes. Miso soup and a natto burger are shown. Luke says that Japanese food is what he loves and that he's happy to try it again in another world. The girl says he made too much food. The girl says that although she really wanted to try cooking, overeating is unhealthy, and you can't just throw away food. He suggests donating it to a nearby orphanage where there is a couple. The girl says it's a great idea and says she can experiment with cooking and give the extra to orphans. Luke says it's a double win. The girl reports that Karen tried making even more dishes and donated them to different orphanages every day. The woman asks if he's going out again today, and he says she gave him the idea and he knows, but still. The man thinks he wants to laze around the house. The woman says the orphanages are so unhygienic that she can't get used to them, and she screams. The man says he is too. The top right says that even with cleansing magic, the task can't be cleaned, and it's full of orphans who can't use magic and don't wash. Several children call out to Karen-sama. The bottom right girl says that her younger brother fell and won't get up and asks for help. And another. Luke says he really doesn't like the local church, and the girl says there's nothing he can do. He'll have to help. The woman explains it's not the best place for a sick person. The guy says he's having trouble breathing and might have pneumonia. The man invites him here. The guy lies with his eyes closed and breathing evenly. He explains that his breathing is normalizing and says that this is the treatment. Luke says he should feel better. The girl thanks him and says, "Thank God. Thank you very much." The girl asks how much it will cost, and Luke says nothing. The girl is surprised. He says he's the Duke's son and doesn't need money. He cured the sick man so he could practice magic. He explains that he now knows how to treat this illness and therefore should say thank you. The woman asks if it's true that money isn't needed. The boy thanks her, and Luke tells her she's a smart girl and that if she'd been born under different circumstances, she would have had an easy life. The girl says she needs syrup, and Luke asks if that's it. In the orphanage director's office, the girl says that the Duke has more money than he can spend, and since it's just lying around, why not spend it? The man says 50 gold should be enough to clean up the orphanage and start training the children. Luke says yes, but it's tiring and he won't take no for an answer. Luke explains that he was just hanging around at first, but he's intrigued, and the orphanages would make excellent training grounds. The image contains no speech bubbles or text other than the chapter title. The title indicates that this is Chapter 4, titled A Pleasant Shopping Trip. Luke reports that the 3 years since he and Karen got engaged have been quite fun. Syrup handles most of the housework, Karen cooks almost every day, and Luke, in turn, has continued to go to the bar for beauty and health reasons. Luke says his lazy life is gradually becoming more and more. He says that he has gained many different experiences thanks to Karen and explains that such days will sooner or later come to an end. Luke explains that he wants to spend the rest of his time with her because she will be entering the academy this spring and will begin student life in the dorms. He says that although he thinks she's just late, he'll have to go look for her. He reports that she probably won't come. Luke says it's unusual to see Test's brother at this hour, and notices Test walking past him, even though he's taller than him, and asks if Test isn't interested. The man identifies himself as Test Ugolo Descastos, 19 years old. He says the most important thing now is to find Karen and says he knows where she might be. He finds Karen and calls her. The narrator explains that Karen has achieved great success with her diet, and she is now known as a beauty who combines sweetness and femininity. The woman says it's Iris's sister. Luke says it's Iris's sister. The woman says she's glad to see Luke. Iris Ugolo Descastos asks what happened. The woman asks permission to take Karen away from the man. Iris Ugolo Descastos says the woman simply came to meet him and asks if she wants to interrupt their tea party. The man explains that he came to return the stolen goods. Luke reports that she seems to think that she can somehow influence him with her gaze. He says that such tricks don't work on him. The girl says that she also wanted to talk to Luke and apologizes. The woman says that, for her personally, Karen is the sweetest girl. The woman says it's not her fault. Luke says his sister might have had enough. He says he'll be entering the academy next year too, so they have to wait. The girl says she can still date Karen as much as she wants at the academy. The guy says that's unfair. The girl says that now they will both fight for her and calls the confused Karen sweet. The man says that she is upset. Luke says there's no way out. The girl says Luke's handsome face scares her. Luke tells her it's time to go to the academy and wishes her luck. The guy says they rarely see each other, so there's no harm in setting the mood, and asks if Karen is coming. The woman apologizes to Ms. Iris for her rudeness. The woman says hi and calls Luke, repeating hi. She considers him the only wonderful man who suits her so well. Luke wants this. A few months later, the girl asks him what book to choose today, and the man replies that he'll think about it. Then the girl reveals that since Karen entered the academy, she hasn't left the house. Syrup says he always does the shopping, and when he needs to choose something, he invites the merchant over. The man explains that he has no other best friends besides Meru, so he has no one to meet, and asks her to wait. Luke suggests they go for a walk today, but the girl says it's not like them. He says it's okay and asks her to join him. The girl replies, "Whatever you say," and says that this hasn't happened in a long time. The man says that the horses need to be urged on to keep up. Luke says that the three of them traveled to different places together with Karen and says he missed her, then announces that they have arrived. Syrup explains that the cape hides the ears and tail and says that he is a good coachman. The woman says that no one will block the Duke's carriage as soon as possible. He says that power is a great force. He asks if what he wants is here. The MYD department store is reported to be a large department store that is also found in the games, and most equipment and gifts for any event can be found here. Luke says that Syrup can buy whatever he wants too. Syrup thanks him. The man greets them and wishes them welcome. The man says his name is Mosky Maid, he is the owner of the store, and clarifies whether he understood correctly that in front of him is he, the Duke of the Discastos family. He says that the man knows his name and explains that information is the main weapon of merchants. A woman invites us into the reception hall for honored guests. A man informs us that this is the reception hall for honored guests. The woman says they always welcome their guests warmly. The man explains that, although he's probably not the best partner, he'll let his daughter show him around today. Luke stands nearby. He introduces himself and Syrup, and Akari Mind says it's nice to meet you and gives her name. He and Syrup reply that they're also pleased to meet you. He says he's glad Akari is polite to both him and Syrup. The text explains that Akari Mind is one of the main characters. The woman asks what they'd like to buy today. Luke says he thought he'd only be able to visit the store once, but he didn't know they offered personalized service, and he considers that a blessing. The girl says it's a good question and asks to see some recommended products, such as beauty products or something for convenience. Then she says she understands and suggests they look at something else. The woman says Akari is a very positive person who unobtrusively showed and explained the products one by one. She says the first thing she wants to show them is a magic hair dryer. Maida says he's done a great job shopping and has bought almost everything. Syrup asks what Maida would like to buy, and the girl replies, No, she doesn't want anything. The woman says that in that case, the girl in the maid costume says that they very rarely go shopping together, so he would like to give her a gift. A woman offers a girl a red choker and says it's wonderful, and the girl replies, Ah. Luke says such a thing is for a simple servant, but he buys it. The girl thanks him and calls him Master Luke. The guy says he thought she liked him, or maybe he's mistaken. The man explains it's gratitude for all the care. The girl says that she will never get over him. A woman asks how things are. The girl in the maid costume says everything is fine and asks what Luke would say. The woman with the tied hair says it suits them very well. The woman with the tied hair calls Luke, Mr. Luke. The girl in the maid costume explains that the choker goes very well. He says he's glad she liked it. The girl says it was a very pleasant shopping trip today. The woman thanks her for visiting their store. Luke says that sometimes you have to have days like this. The guy says that next year he will also leave home and enter the academy, so he needs to go out at least a little. Luke says he still needs to sort out some things before leaving home, and says, well, that's it. The man explains that he wants to know the reason Luke turned into a disgusting, fat toad. He says he has some ideas, but he needs to do all this even though he's too lazy. He explains that the path of laziness is thorny. Luke reveals that there is one problem that has been plaguing him for a long time, and it has to do with his appearance. He says the materials were ready from the start, but he says he can't imagine what it would take to become like that. The boy says he had doubts because the food in this world wasn't compatible with his body, even though the ingredients were the same as in his past life. He also considered the possibility of a weak constitution and allergies, but he couldn't find a satisfactory answer. He asks if it's possible to transform into such a person simply because of an unresolved life. Luke says food and ingredients. Then he says maybe Karen will understand something. Karen reports that almost all of the ingredients used are poisonous and asks if everything is all right. He explains that even if these materials are used as medicine, depending on the method of consumption, there are possible cases of abnormal changes in the body and death. Luke explains that this explains the strange transformation and says that he'll probably check again to see how things are going with the poison. The girl asks what he was like before. He reports that until he was 4, he ate well, slept well, and was a pretty child. The man clarifies that there were no strange changes. He explains that he didn't even notice his weak character until someone told him about it. Luke says he remembers how, before the incident, they served him a huge table of delicious food on his birthday, and the maids were also frightened, so when he collapsed, everyone was very surprised. The girl explains that after that, Luke's condition worried them for a year. He was ill when the magician. He asks who used to cook for him, and the girl says that there was a personal chef, but then he quit, so the head butler replaced him. Luke says he cooked the food that made her sick and says it all comes down to one thing. He says it's time to settle this problem. Luke pulls back the curtain. A man in a chair, covered in bandages and blindfolded, reacts with fear to the greeting. Luke tells the man he's greeting the butler. The boy ponders why he turned into a disgusting toad and says that if he had grown up normally, everything wouldn't have been so terrible. The man in bandages reacts with surprise and thanks them for cooking for him every day. Luke says that, unfortunately, she wasn't right for him. The man says he's sure. Luke says that someone slipped poison into his food. The man breathes heavily. He says his father gave the order and asks if the man guessed correctly. The man responds by calling Luke Lord Duke Disgustos. The man says it must have been difficult to deal with him, who wasn't dying, but was growing healthier. Luke says he didn't care about him at all, and then he even created the antidote because he didn't know he'd learned restoration magic, and this confirms that. The old woman says that he is the one who put poison in her food and exclaims. Luke says he's sorry. The man says he didn't think he'd confess so easily. He says he's bored and that his thirst for revenge would only get stronger if the other person resisted. The man says he forgives but adds that. Luke says that the punishment has not been cancelled and that the man will only become a test subject in magical practice, while the man asks what will be done to him, and Luke says that his life will not be taken. The man says he'll be giving laziness as a gift. He says that if he uses it in public, the result will be similar and he'll take note of it. The man remains silent. The man tells him to get back to work. Luke says everything is clear now. Duke Disgustos announces that he is his enemy. Luke explains that his father wouldn't be interested in eliminating someone as high-ranking as the head butler, but it would be a shame if he provoked a premature attack. Luke then explains that he will therefore weaken him. The boy says he's trying to make his father's pawns useless. The girl asks Luke where he went and if she can. Luke tells the girl to listen to Syrup. He says he'll be happy if he gets into the academy. The girl says she thought it would be something natural and asks if he was considering going there. Luke says there's a high chance he'll be killed if he goes to the academy, and that not going is entirely possible. He explains that he's already chosen his path, and if he goes to the academy, they'll stop seeing each other, so it's probably not. The girl says she doesn't want to part with Lou either. She explains that her home is not safe either, but she can move anywhere, all for the sake of protecting her lazy life. Luke announces that he will assist the main characters from the shadow, arrange a confrontation between the royalist and aristocratic factions, and Duke Descastos, the leader of the aristocratic faction, will be defeated, as in the original story. He explains that the easiest way with the highest survival rate is his favorite game world, and says that he may have been a troublesome person but maybe it was worth it. Luke says he'll play Luke to the bitter end. He says they'll see if they can kill him. The girl wishes him a safe journey, and he thanks her. The text informs him that a year has passed. The entrance examination center of the Royal Academy of Aristocrats. The entrance examinations consist of 3 parts: academic, magical, and practical. It is reported that the top student in each subject will be placed in a special class, regardless of status. Luke says he doesn't want to be first and lets things take their course. The man asks what kind of human beast this is. The guy tells her that she's also taking the exam. The man reacts with surprise. The woman says it's the same. Luke says the girl has green hair, emerald-like eyes, and is a beast man. He reveals that she is one of the heroines, the adventurer Ruby. A boy kicks a man. A girl attacks, throwing punches that break objects around him. The guy says wow when Luke kicks the man. The right panel explains that large-scale combat techniques are a complement to the beastman's physical strength. In the middle panel, a man says that he is Ugolo Descastos next. In the left panel, a man explains that now is such a good time. He stands behind the man and listens. The guy says he can use non-attribute magic, then says it's very troublesome. In the background, a man announces he hit his target. In the foreground, a girl punches a man in the face. Luke says it's next. The girl smiles. The girl says it's wow. Luke says he's lost her and says he'll probably meet her at the academy. He reports that he was able to pass the exam in the original with excellent grades, so there's no need to worry. The girl reports that this happened the next day. The girl reports that she received notification of successful passing of the exam. Luke looks at her. He announces that the adult love strategy simulator is starting. The title of Chapter 6 appears, with the name of the entrance exam to Aristocrat's Royal Academy. The girl adjusts her glasses. The academy building and its coat of arms are depicted in the background. Luke says he knows he shouldn't say that, but he's very good-looking. He explains that a regular uniform shouldn't look so fancy, but his perfect body is too perfect. Luke announces that the carriage is ready, and the girl thanks him and says that today his new life will begin. Royal Academy of Aristocrats. He announces that he will be attending the oldest and most prestigious academy in the kingdom, which is also a venue for various political games. The woman explains that most children of aristocrats enroll here. The man explains that relatively recently, even commoners have been accepted if they're good enough, and the number of students has noticeably increased. The text explains that the academy has 3 main faculties: combat, magic, and academics. The man explains that in the kingdom. The man reports that the academy has its own research center that is actively developing magic, and they even have a legendary mage. The man says the first task is to raise your base stats, the second is to interact with the main character. He explains that depending on your stats, you encounter different characters, and if you want a specific ending, you need to take specific actions. Luke explains that in his past life, he fought against the protagonist from the shadows and played the role of an aristocratic villain. But he wants to avoid that storyline because he wants to live. He explains that he's no longer an ugly fat man and is confident that this will bring about changes, but he must survive for them. He reports that the girl has prepared everything she needs. The girl says she is worried and asks if she has forgotten anything. The woman says that if it weren't for the rules, she'd be cleaning the dorm, noting that there shouldn't be a difference of less than 2 years between a servant and an apprentice. The text suggests that her sense of duty is only growing stronger. Luke explains that students who can't manage on their own are allowed to take a servant, but due to the age difference, he can't take syrup. Luke explains that the servant must be close in age to the aristocrat, so it won't work. Syrup says she'd be happy if Luke went. He says he's not sure she can handle it alone and that everything will be fine. The girl says he's the kind of person who doesn't like to put in extra effort and that everything is fine. Luke says he can do anything if he wants, and tells her that Karen is also at the academy. The woman says she knows, but the girl says that she is the one who wants to take care of Luke. The woman says the syrup has been protecting her since she was a child, and Luke thanks her. The woman says she's madly in love with him and her affection hasn't faded. The man says he believes it, at least. Luke explains that she's always been his personal servant, but she's been having a hard time these past few days. He explains that she's probably struggling. Luke says she's his only family. The girl says the word syrup. He says he's grateful. The girl is surprised and calls him sir. The woman says she'll definitely repay him. A guy asks a girl if she will be his girlfriend and will wait. Luke says he trusts and will wait for his return, then says no. The girl says she'll miss him. He says he'll miss her too. The guy says he'll be back at the end of the year and asks her to be patient until then, and the girl says okay. The guy asks the girl to look after the house while he's gone. Luke says he'll be waiting for her return. He explains that he won't be able to be with her for a while, but he's not going to give up the syrup and needs to wait until he finishes his studies. He tells her that when he graduates from the academy and leaves the Duke's house, it's time to come, and asks if she's sure. The girl says she thought she was no longer needed, but she has no intention of leaving him, and agrees. Luke says he won't abandon them either and is glad to hear it. The girl says that if Karen forgives her, he says that then they can become a real family. The girl responds with a question. The girl is surprised, and then says that of course, syrup is just so sweet and she adores her. Luke says it's time to take a step toward a new life. The woman wishes Luke luck. Below, it says this is academy territory. The caption says the scene takes place near the dormitories. The man says he was supposed to meet his escort here. He asks if it's true that he's Mr. He, and the man explains that it's her. The man says, "And you?" Rivera Glico reports that she immediately recognized the interlocutor, as her father had told her about him, and apologizes, introducing herself as the daughter of Baron Malso Glico. She says her name is Rivera Glico. The text explains that Rivera Glico is 15 years old, the daughter of Baron Malso Glico. Luke introduces his daughter, Mal. The man says the main character looks like her father, and the woman explains that it's funny that Rivera also looks like her father. The woman explains that she was assigned to accompany Luke, and he's the only one who calls her father. Mal. Luke says he can call her. The girl asks Rivera if she likes magic and says that the boy told her about it. She loves magic and wants to work in the ministry in the future. Rivera says that it is clear. The girl says Luke will definitely succeed. Luke explains that girls usually laugh at his desire and asks why. The woman says the girl is talented and takes magic seriously, so everything will be fine. The girl replies that, of course, she thanks her for the support. The woman says she'll be accompanying Luke and asks him not to worry too much about her, as she can take care of herself. Luke explains that he wants to take care of her. The woman says she wants to get to know him better, and Luke asks if she really likes him that much. The woman says that their magic is an art, and he says that now it is clear. The woman says that you can meet Rivera in the game if you level up your magic, and that she is one of those whose love for magic goes too far, and also says that she is obsessed with magic. Luke says there will be problems if they continue talking about magic, so he suggests they discuss it later, as he needs to get settled in now, and informs her that he's already done everything. The girl explains that she didn't want them to deal with such a trivial matter and says she's amazed by his enthusiasm. Luke remains silent. The girl asks if he wants to talk about magic and says that she would be happy to go to a place where they can talk over a cup of tea. He says that this smell is the perfect tea for talking about magic. Luke says the tea is delicious and thanks him for agreeing to chat. The girl suggests getting straight to the point and asking her opinion on magic, and the man agrees. He says that, firstly, regarding elementless magic. The girl explains that elementless magic is elementless magic that elementless magic. Elementless magic this. He says that she inherited a love for elementless magic from. Luke says her knowledge is very useful and believes she has enormous potential, but there is still room for improvement. The woman asks if he knows what he'll do next, and the man adds that like father and like son. He says that with Rivera he can learn magic. The woman says there are many different people in this world, and she doesn't want Luke to suffer because of them. Luke explains that he doesn't want to suffer and wants to live in peace. The woman says that she also wants to live in peace and hopes that everything will work out for them. Luke says that they should support each other and not. The woman announces that it's time and they're leaving. The man explains that they're heading to the main event of the day, the entrance ceremony in the academy's main hall. The woman reports that there are many people here whom she doesn't know. Luke reacts to something with surprise. The man remarks that he caused this to happen. Luke asks if the man noticed him. The man notes a hostile look and a look of disgust. He says that this is their first meeting and it seems that he is not the only one. The chapter title indicates that this is the 7th chapter, titled Class 0. A man and a woman are in a large hall with rows of desks and large windows, but there is no speech in the scene. The girl asks, "Is something wrong, sir?" Luke explains why he's looking at her with such hostility. The girl asks, "Is it him?" The man says, "Ah." Dan asks if it could be because he serves the enemy faction. The man explains that the Marshall family is, after all, the head of the royal faction and calls them a natural enemy. The woman tells Luke that his neighbor, Lady Lingshan, is a very brave lady. The woman says that magic isn't her forte, but she's good at using elemental magic as a shield. The woman says that if she remembers correctly, magic is described as a walking dictionary, and asks if she even knows about all the magic. It is reported that Lingshan is the protagonist's childhood friend and a knight, and if chosen, the story will follow the line of the Marshall family. The woman says that even if things don't work out with the other characters, he can always return to her. The man says she will be a good wife who loves her children and husband. If the protagonist does not choose her, then Luke will be with her, who informs her that she will appear as an enemy of the protagonist. Nothing remained of her pure and kind character, but she did not lose a drop of her beauty, remaining a captivating sight. The man explains that despite being a commoner, he became a knight and can use elemental magic. He's been fighting monsters and training since childhood. The man explains that Lingshan's servant, Dan, is also studying at the academy. The boy says that he has entered the academy and plans to follow in his father's footsteps. He wants to become a noble knight. But the man explains that this will only further create a gap between them and the aristocratic faction. Luke says that if he doesn't do anything, he'll get mad at him too, and that'll be a lot of trouble. Luke announces that Irina Shilda, the god of Arecidas, will give the welcoming speech. Irina says well. The first princess of the Arecidas kingdom, Irina Shilda, god Arecidas, says that she is also a heroine, but as a representative of the students in the game, she did not interest him. She is simply beautiful and there is nothing more to her. He has already looked at his sister Iris. Her beauty is enough for him. He says that. Luke explains that he already has a girlfriend and, besides, he's not going to sit still. The girl notices this and says that it looks like he's not going to sit still. Luke reacts with surprise. The guy asks if they want to rest, and the girl replies yes, saying she's interested. The man says they can't really talk for now. The girl says she'll wake them up when it's over and thanks them, calling them her savior. The woman says she's glad he's an understanding person. Luke lies down and sleeps. The girl is silent. The guy is silent. Luke says, "Mr. Luke." The man says that everyone has already left and it's time to wake up. The woman asks if they're done yet. The man says yes. He says it's the same pillow. The woman clarifies that it's the same one. The man explains that when his father first met Luke, he saw his pillow floating in the air and commented on how beautiful it was. Luke says he understands now. The woman says she's glad to hear it and that she's always admired honest people. Luke explains he'll let the woman use the pillow. The girl says she'd like to right now, but they're not done yet, adding that she's even a little crazy. He suggests going further, grabs the girl's hand, and she responds with surprise and asks if he minds. Luke says he needs to take responsibility then and offers to walk the girl to class, asking if it's true. The girl says it's just her first time holding hands with a guy and is relying on him. Below, a girl with a ponytail looks serious, and Luke and the girl walk hand in hand. The woman says it's vulgar, and the guy and girl react with surprise. The girl screams that they didn't do anything wrong and asks what's wrong. Luke tells them not to pay attention to them. He says he doesn't want to waste his energy on something like that. The girl says she should have expected that from him. The girl asks if that made him angry. Luke says the girl is fun to talk to and shouldn't be wasted on anything else. The girl is surprised, then says she has fun talking to them too. The man and the girl discuss whether they have fun with the girl, and the man replies that they do. A voice says they need to finish this quickly. The man says great, everyone's here. The woman says it looks like they can sit wherever they want. The guy asks to introduce himself. Luke says he's your homeroom teacher, Glorin Research, and explains that he explained a lot of things in the game. The woman announces that she will be the homeroom teacher's assistant and that her name is Siraz. He notes that here she is, the heroine who is the hardest to achieve, and calls her a witch who has seen the magic of the abyss. The man says there are 20 people in the class, including the 3 students with the highest exam scores, and regardless of their results, he will evaluate them based on their abilities. Miral says he will evaluate them based on their abilities. The girl raises her hand and asks if they're going to be judged by their abilities. How are they going to measure them? The man with the monocle says that's an excellent question. The boy replies, yes, Lady Marshall. The guy announces that they have a great invention, a magic clock, and orders them to channel their magical power into it to turn it on. Luke says beep, demonstrating the clock's operation. The man says that thanks to this great invention, one can check one's rank and magical power at any time. Luke says this is a stats screen from the game and tells you that his name is Luke Hugelo Descastos, he is 15 years old, level 1, number of monsters defeated is 0, class affiliation is class 0, and other data. The guy asks if everything has been activated. The man explains that the magical power has now been recorded, and the characteristics can be seen by everyone. He says they use detection magic to make it work. Luke reports that the grades and rankings are available to everyone, and they view them as well, and he's thinking about the ranking of 300 students. Luke explains the mastered magic. Magic without an element includes household magic, strengthening magic, support magic, healing magic, and unknown, while magic with an element includes mage. Irina reports that she placed first in general skills and second in the competition. Ruby reports that she placed first in practical skills and 10th in the competition. Rivera reports that she's ranked first in magic. Miral reports that she's ranked first in academics, and Luke reports that he's ranked 5th. The guy says he knew it would happen and notes that he came in second. The man asks, what do you think? The guy says that magical tools are a direct path to human evolution. The woman asks him to pull himself together and suggests continuing. Luke asks what the girl has there. The girl calls the guy an eccentric, says she's crazy about magic, and says she'd like to see herself. The young man explains that the parliament is in session in this hall and that important issues are discussed here. The man explains that the parliament is made up of representatives from different regions and that they pass laws. The woman says she'll talk about life at the academy and explains that they choose what to study. The man calms down and coughs. The woman explains that current ranks are just initial assessments and invites them to choose the future they desire. She explains that if they don't give their all, they'll end up at the bottom, adding that this is reality. Luke says there are exceptions. The man explains that growth is up to them. He reports that this is the Academy's fencing tournament. The woman explains that the event is held every year and is the Academy's biggest event, and also explains that even with poor grades, participants will have a chance to prove themselves there. The boy informs the winner that he will receive the title of Noble Knight and that he can also challenge the tournament winner if he wishes. Luke asks him to prepare for that day. The text next to Luke states that Dan wants to become a Noble Knight. The man says it will be useful to him in his career. The man explains that it means he wants to win the tournament. The woman reports that their system for preparing for the tournament includes training matches, which are essentially ranked matches. The woman says you can read the details on the watch, and she'll explain everything too. The man explains that, in essence, ranks are still very important. Luke explains that, to summarize what she's told you, the basic rules are as follows. Those of lower rank can challenge those of higher rank. You can't refuse a duel, but the fight won't begin until you give an answer. If the challenger wins, they'll rise in rank and... He says there are duels and team fights, each of which can only be participated in once a day. A representative can be appointed in case of unforeseen circumstances, and if the date of the fight is postponed for a long time, a technical loss is counted. He explains that it all resembles a game. The man reports. The boy says he doesn't want to get involved. Luke explains he's too lazy. The boy turns to the teacher. The guy asks when he can make the first challenge. The girl says that it is true. The guy says that in that case. The woman says that as soon as they receive the watch, then it's already possible. The guy announces that he is challenging Luke Hugelo Descastos. Luke announces that it's begun and he's been challenged. Luke explains that this is a training battle with the game's villain. Chapter 8 is called The Training Battle. He is depicted on the right side, and Dan on the left. Luke explains that in the original story, the training battle went like this. Luke was trained only in the humanities, and the future knight easily defeated him. He explains that he was bound to hold a grudge against him after that. The boy explains that his school life is flourishing, and he will become more visible and popular in. He explains that he refuses and says no, and the man explains that in the original, he was simply furious that a commoner dared to challenge him. The guy says he's lazy. The man asks if he's scared and expresses surprise. Luke says he's in second place and asks what place the other guy is in. The guy says he's on his 20th and explains that he understands there's no point in this duel for him. The girl says she doesn't want to fight an idiot who doesn't even understand this and asks to be allowed to intervene. The girl says that a worthy nobleman of the kingdom must accept the challenge thrown down to him. Luke says he can then fight her and asks what she said. The girl asks if Luke also has a high rank and whether he will refuse, and then says that he has always been hot-tempered. The girl explains that she wants to be out of the spotlight, and Luke says that actively participating in all this conflicts with his lazy lifestyle. The woman asks for forgiveness, but says she's too lazy. The boy says Dan has excellent fighting skills, and he explains that Descastos has magical skills. The girl says she'd like to see them fight, and another girl exclaims Aaron's name. The girl informs him that if he continues to refuse, he will lose his rank, and she also tells him to follow the academy's rules. The man explains that, moreover, an aristocrat must respond to the requests of his people. The girl says that this is the duty of an aristocrat and refusal is simply unacceptable. Luke says that this is very annoying. He says that at the academy they evaluate based on abilities, not background, and asks if she has forgotten about this. The girl says that she actually listened to the teacher. Luke says he can't just refuse her, even though he doesn't like the princess. Luke sighs, and the girl with short hair and glasses looks at him with slight concern. The guy says that since Her Highness asks, the woman says she can't go against the system alone. The man says he has no choice. Luke says he hates wasting his energy on anything. The woman says she needs to lose this fight to fulfill her role. The man asks if she's going to lose and asks if she's okay. The girl says that she heard that Luke doesn't like physical activity, and reports that his opponent is a knight apprentice from the Marshall family, who, judging by the test results, is used to fighting. He says that everything is fine and says that there is no need to doubt it. The guy says he's very tired. The girl looks at him silently. The girl smiles. The woman says Luke is such a mysterious man. Luke tells her she can use unique magic and is a high-ranking aristocrat who doesn't want to fight. The woman asks if this is true. He says that doesn't look like an aristocrat, and the girl explains that aristocrats often worry about looking their best in public. The girl says that, by the way, she's not trying to offend them. Luke says he's glad to hear it and says he'll now know the girl won't hate him. The girl asks what. He says never, and the girl says that she would. The boy tells her that there's only one way to survive in this world: kill. The girl explains that if you don't kill, you'll be killed. Luke explains that he doesn't want to kill, but he understands there's no other way. The woman says they weren't here for the entrance exam. The text at the bottom right says this is an arena. The man says they're interested in watching the first battle in advance and asks if everyone is ready, to which someone replies yes. Luke looks down with a serious expression. The boy clenches his fist, and the girl stands in front of him with her hands on her hips. The guy says he'll put the other guy in his place and saw him sleeping at the entrance ceremony. The man asks if she'll wait for him here. The girl replies yes. Luke says he hears, but he doesn't hear gratitude for agreeing. The man screams that he's being ignored. The guy says it's high ranking. The guy asks what level Luke is, and Luke explains that he doesn't follow the rules of the game and hasn't spent time on levels, believing that skill and strategy are more important, and then begins to talk about his level. The guy says Has says he's the first. The guy says he didn't expect Luke to fight monsters and asks if every nobleman has to fight monsters, even if they're noblemen. Luke says he didn't expect that. The man announces that participant Dan and participant he Descastos must take positions. The boy takes the sword in both hands and remains silent. Luke says he hopes it will be a good fight. The guy says this is his first rating fight. The woman announces that the fight has begun. Luke explains that in the original game fight the difference in strength is huge, but he can defeat Baloo in 1 minute. Luke explains that he himself will not admit defeat to Baloo, meaning the judge must accept it, and adds that he doesn't want anyone else to suffer. He says he relies on his interlocutor and deflects the attack with his sword. The man reacts to this with surprise. Luke says he can't afford to lose because it would mean the end for him. The man declares that he has no intention of giving up and will fight to the end. He says what it is. The man asks to let him go, and he says that he already has. He intercepts the man's sword and parries his blow. The man falls backwards. Luke says so. Swords are lying on the field. The sound of clanging and clinking is heard. The man says that in the original game, he wins when he uses his special move, but he can't lose here. The man says he didn't suffer any serious injuries. Luke says they're finishing up. He says that Sun is slow. Sun tries to defend himself and makes a sound. He lifts Sun by the collar. Luke states that his special magic is essentially a stat boost, it's cheat magic, and the effect gets stronger as his magical power and body strength increases, but while he's this weak, the boost won't be significant. The guy says that before going to bed he can't show fear. Then he says that he won, but hasn't yet created an image of a villain in the eyes of others. Luke says something needs to be done. The man places his hand on the other man's chest. The girl screams what he's doing. The man with the eye patch says, "Ah!" He falls into the abyss, surrounded by smoke or steam. The man reports that Luke Hugelo Descastos has won and demands Dan's release. Luke says that's fine. The girl screams. The man struggles and makes a sound of pain. The girl says yes. The girl calls him a coward and says he was unconscious. Luke says that's not how an aristocrat should behave. He says he was forced to fight and that what goes around comes around. Luke asks if everyone has seen it and says that he is ready to accept the challenge to a fight right now, and then says to consider it a special favor. He says that maybe someone wants to take advantage of his tiredness. The girl says ah and coughs. The guy asks if anyone is there. The man says, "Then let me tell everyone something." Luke says to respect those who have knowledge, meaning him, and to respect those who study magic. Then he adds that he says he hates idiots who rely on force, and if other savages like him want to challenge him. Luke says he'll make each of them regret this. The girl is silent. Several people in uniform watch the scene. 3 women smile. In the background, a man and a woman walk past a window. He sits at a table on the right, writing with a quill. The woman on the left at the table is also busy writing. The title announces that this is Chapter 9 and asks about the outcome of the first duel. Luke hopes no one will challenge him again and that his classmates will tell everyone how bad he is. He says this shouldn't go unpunished. The girl shouts that Dan will defeat Luke. He tells the girl to remember this and suggests they go. The girl asks if he's sure he won't say anything, to which he replies with a question. Like, the guy says they were planning to catch him and asks them not to let him fall. Luke says he's lazy and asks what. He says he doesn't want to waste time and energy making up excuses. The man explains that he thinks he's said enough, and that besides, how can anyone explain anything to an idiot whose only thoughts are justice and pride? The woman says that Luke is probably right and asks if he can have it. Luke sighs. Irina asks what Your Highness is and asks to call her Irina since they are classmates. He informs that then she will be called him and asks what they wanted. The woman says she likes Luke's face and thanks him. Luke says he doesn't want to be anywhere near royalty and that they have zero compatibility. The woman explains that she heard about Luke from her brother and that their brothers were classmates. The girl says she was very interested to see what he was capable of as a member of the Disgastos family and thanks him for a wonderful fight. She then apologizes and says that's all she wanted to say. The man asks what that was for, and the girl replies that she can't relax. Luke tells her not to pay attention and that it's okay. The girl asks what he's talking about, and Luke says that it was a great first day. He asks why he is standing here, and the man says that he is taking a little rest. The woman says she hasn't eaten cooked food in a long time and is completely full, and is happy to hear it. She explains that she cooked it specifically to make sure everyone liked it. The woman says his food always makes her feel better, and Luke warns her not to overpraise him, otherwise he'll get carried away. He says there's nothing wrong with it and the girl already has results, and she says it's all thanks to him and he just gave a couple of tips. The girl says he's too modest and advises him to at least accept praise occasionally. Luke explains that not everyone can find a successful business idea and that it's entirely her fault. He says he doesn't need her and that he will also benefit if the Carabin family becomes richer. The girl says that he is the only aristocrat who can say something like that. The woman says they always talked a lot. The man asks if he's serious, and the woman replies that of course he is. Luke explains that his family was indifferent to him, so he fell in love with Karen's cooking. He also wanted to live a lazy life, and she knows all this and gives him her unwavering love. Karen tells Luke that he loves her only for her cooking. Karen asks Luke to listen to her. The woman says she loves him with all her heart and asks if he'll stay in the room with her, noting how interesting everything is. He explains that Karen is the most important thing in the world to him. He can't live without her, even if the ducal and count's families fall. The woman asks even if they're not married. Luke says to let him stay with her that evening. The woman says that no woman could ever refuse him and calls him a villain. A woman says she'll be jealous if a guy flies through the air with someone else, and he says he'll try not to. The man asks who's there at this hour, and he calls him Disgastos and is surprised he's out at this late hour. The guy says he's planning something bad and notices the tracks. Then he expresses surprise. Luke asks what's going on. The guy says it's beautiful. He notes that the movements are like a dance, but at the same time look like a professional fighter. He explains that it's a pleasure to watch. Luke explains that physical abilities typically increase with each level, and a person with a lower level is noticeably weaker. He explains that he thought he lost because he was too distracted, but he was wrong. Luke reveals that his physical abilities are on a different level, and the difference between them is simply enormous. He says he's being cheeky, but he's trying so hard. The man says he's never seen anything like this before and asks why he didn't realize it right away. The guy says he was trained to become a great knight, he trained a lot and leveled up. They told him he had to dedicate himself completely to battle, but even so, he's not up to this guy. The man says, well, wow. Luke says our world is very wide. Then he says he needs to think about it. The boy says that training can undoubtedly make him stronger. He explains that the main problem is that he needs to use his brain. He explains that he doesn't understand magic well and isn't very good at studying, but the academy provides the right environment for him to improve. Luke says he wants to beat Luke, even though he doesn't see a chance right now. The man says how cool it would be. He says that he will definitely surpass him, and the guy says that he will challenge him again. The guy says that even though he's very far from him now, he'll try. The man says this, removing his hand from his face. The man runs to the castle. Luke says he's in the dining room before breakfast. The girl says good morning to Sister Iris, and Luke greets Rivera and wishes her a good morning. The text says it's breakfast and tea with honey. A woman asks Luke if he's been forgetting to eat well, and he tells her that even when she's in a bad mood, she's still very caring. Luke reveals that she knew he did the same and explains that his sister is always considerate of those close to her. He explains that, as a high-ranking aristocrat, she is kind to those around her, and given her beauty, some consider her a saint. Iris says she also chaired the welcome party for the new students. He reports that he, as the new student representative, approached her to say hello, and there were also rumors that the varsity students had lost and were leaving. The boy bids Lady Iris goodbye, and Luke tells his sister he'll see her again and wishes to work hard. The girl agrees and suggests offering her a medicine to improve her blood pressure. He reports that his first fight was a sensational event. He explains that it's time to brush his teeth. He explains the creaking sound when the door opens. Two men report that the other aristocrats look at him with respect. Luke says the royalists look at him with hostility. The man and woman explain that the neutrals are simply curious and don't yet know how to interact with Luke. The girl says she can't believe it happened. He explains it was inevitable and says they need to move on now. The girl turns to the door and leaves, and he stands there watching her. The woman reports that the threat worked, and no one will bother her for a while. Luke says he can finally focus on his studies. The woman says that first comes the elective. He says that the academy has two types of classes: compulsory basic subjects and electives, magic and practical skills, and that it's similar to universities. Luke says that the game had classes for leveling up each of the classes, and says that he doesn't need them, he'll choose what he likes. He says that if he doesn't need practical skills, then these subjects are boring, which means magic and knowledge of magic is necessary to achieve the ideal lazy life. The girl asks if they've decided, and explains that she's chosen magic and the science of magical instruments as her main subjects, and has forgotten the rest because it's less annoying. Luke says he's also decided. The girl informs him that there are no more classes today and invites Luke to go with her. The girl says there are separate rooms for practicing magic. The man talks about training halls, and the girl repeats the question about training halls. The girl explains that different rooms can be used depending on rank, with rank 0s being able to use all the facilities, such as the arena, classroom, gym, training room, and so on. She says this is the best environment for young talents. Luke explains that there's a ranking system in place here that encourages competition between students. The girl invites them in. He says it's spacious. The girl says there's still some work to be done and asks if it's too much space. The man says yes. The girl slams her hand on the floor, causing a powerful explosion of energy. The woman explains that this place is a dance hall where you can feel the rhythm and energy. Luke explains that here you can learn to control your movements and emotions to become stronger. The woman says she changed the space, and he says, "Oh." The woman says they can even study there privately and asks if they've ever seen such magic. Luke explains that he's the only one in his family who uses magic and hasn't seen such a spell in books, even though he didn't have many. The man says he hopes to learn a lot from Luke. He asks if this is a magic circle and explains that circles should be smaller for everyday use, and that this circle still needs to be corrected. The girl explains that it's very important to be able to draw circles correctly and that this needs to be learned. Luke says that magic is convenient, but it takes some effort, and explains that he can use non-elemental magic, but without imagination he would not have succeeded, and once he got used to handling it, it became easier than ever. He says he likes depth and asks if she likes it. She replies that she does, which is why she's interested in him. The woman says she'll start by writing down some information about the man she's talking to. The man asks if they should get down to business, to which the woman replies that, of course, they can. Luke says there are only two types of people in this world: those who can read and those who can't. He explains that if a person can read, they can learn a lot of new and interesting things, but if they can't, much will remain closed to them. He asks if water magic is easy to use, and Rivera says it is. Rivera explains that water is excellent for both attack and defense, and says he should experiment with it soon. Luke says it's his magic and asks to see it. Rivera says he already has a lot of ideas, and the girl says she's looking forward to it. The woman asks if she's sure. The man says it's best to keep such magic a secret, and the woman confirms that those close to her have already warned her about it. The man asks if the woman won't tell anyone. The woman says the boy knows everything too and everything is fine. The man insists that it's especially forbidden to tell. The girl says she won't tell anyone and promises this, and the man thanks her. The girl says that it's good. The boy reports that his consciousness was taken away by the sleep spell, and that was the first time he saw Lenny's magic. The girl says this. The woman says she's looking forward to it and asks if Luke will continue using this magic. Luke replies that of course. He explains that the analysis says unknown, and that worries him a little. The girl explains that this is original magic, which is why it's not listed, and asks if he's talking about Bala. He explains that original magic doesn't show up in the analysis. Luke says that the assessment needs to be added to the database first. The girl says that the assessment allows for a more detailed analysis and that it would also be a good idea to test Luke's abilities in the dungeon. The woman explains that, unfortunately, the tool size doesn't allow for all its functions, and a more high-tech tool is clearly needed. However, it's logical that they offer a more convenient tool with fewer functions. He says that if you don't pursue convenience, then the man says they need to find another magic watch quickly.